Okay, hello guys. Today is Friday, whichever day of August it is today. And today I'm going to talk about something which I haven't really talked about much at length, which is the politics, the economics, the current situation as we see it. Just kind of covering this whole mess with the Chinese whatever-ish flu and whatever followed. Well, number one is we have found out in these few months, no, actually no, I'm going to start from something different. At the beginning of the 2020, right after Boris Johnson election in England, a friend of mine has wrote on their Facebook a following phrase: just listen to me, you're gonna have a good year, you will be okay, right? And follow this. For which I wrote a reply: well, I probably will have a good year, but you have just elected Boris Johnson. Right, so unfortunately I have to admit I was slightly wrong. So everybody seemed to be having not a very good year overall, and obviously the main reason is that the Chinese influenza. So what has it brought to our attention, right? So I'm not talking about like the actual influence on the whole big economy thing, but what has it actually brought to our attention? Well, it brought to our attention that our doctors seem to be very bad at giving good advice. So for example, instead of like, look, just pack in your house and die, they could have just really kind of told people how to improve their immune system to help actually fight the virus. That's what actually fights the viruses, and I'm not the only one noticing it. So this is why I'm mentioning it. Is like, 'cause at the beginning of this whole thing, sometime in beginning of April, I thought about making a video how, like, look, you know, we need advice how to improve our chances to fight the virus on our own, since at that time there was also talk about how many people who got ill, they ended up getting really hurt or by this virus if they had other conditions. So they had heart disease or some other disease, or obviously old people, but nothing. And still to this day we've got nothing which comes off from the doctors which would say, hey guys, you know, you need to do this, this and this to improve your overall ability to fight viruses. Zero, nothing. Not a single good advice, right? Lots of bad advice, like, you know, stay at home till the point that you go mad and throw yourself out of the window seems to be the main one of them. Wear the masks. Okay, I understand where they come from. If you wear a mask, you are less likely to spread the virus, which is it's going to be held up in a mask. Of course, they forgot to mention how many other things tend to get built up in your mask, so you're not really supposed to wear it more longer than a few minutes. Even during the like medical things, they will always have the masks they can change all the time. But that's okay, you know, they tell us, look, don't go to places where there's lots of sun. Apparently viruses really flourish in the sunlight. Never really known about that. I always thought that viruses flourish in the warm places where there is no sunlight. So, like, don't stay in the bars, don't go to the nightclubs, you know, don't go out drinking at night, you know, just things like this, you know, don't go to places where it's really warm, and then don't spend your night out drinking with lots of other people, because when it's warm and humid, the viruses are more likely to spread. Never heard of that from them, right? It's either you stay at home, or you allowed to do anything else, like nothing in the middle. But what else have we found out? Well, we have found out that people who stock our shop shelves are actually a key personnel, right? So much so that they were the some of the few people which were not allowed to go on and stay at home during this pandemic. Right? If you're a computer person, or if you're some sort of the crazy manager, the trader, whatever, financial trader, you go home and you stay at home, and we're gonna pay you, especially in US, probably more money every month than the person who stocks shelves makes by doing an honest job. Right? So was it $600 a week, which is over nearly $2,500 clean money every month to every person who stayed at home. Whereas the people who were actually stocking the shelves probably not always making as much. As well as many other professions. They're key personnel, but we are not gonna pay them. Because if you want to be a key personnel and still make money, get a better job, then you're gonna get sent home and stay at home getting more money than if you're the person who makes the world go round. Okay, so yes, it's true. My job as a computer person is not as important. Some computer people who do other jobs more important than the stuff I do. Right? But most of the computer people that I know of, guys, really not really that important. But the shop people who stock shop shelves, people who do deliveries from Amazon and similar companies, are key personnel which still gonna get paid so little that it could be equivalent to a slave labor. We have also found out that if there is no people coming to work on the farms in Europe and US, all of a sudden the whole farming industry stops. And apparently working on the farm is actually kind of important. We still don't want to pay those people enough money to actually make it worthwhile for them to turn this into the actual job. We paying them so little that I have actually done a video on that getting a job in England or in many other places as a farm laborer pays you less than staying unemployed. Some crazy shit, isn't it? So, looking at the following situation, so what's happened next? Well, the Chinese flu is an imperfect storm at the perfect time. It's being used to cover up all the issues we had in our economy coming up into this year. Maybe in the next couple of years we're looking to have a very, very nasty explosion or implosion of our economy, which is based solely on huge debts that can't be serviced probably anymore for much longer. And we're not talking just about personal debts, with like student debts, where people coming out from universities with hundreds of thousands, tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars, pounds, whatever in debt. Yeah, I'm not talking about most of Europe where people can actually study for free. Hell, people can actually study for free in fucking Russia and in Ukraine. That's weird, you know. You can get a free education if you study well, yeah, you can. Not in UK, not in US, not in a few other countries, I guess. They're all very, very, what was it they said? Any ism is bad except for capitalism? Right? We have learned that capitalism is brilliant at taking care not only about our education, but also about our health. Because it was the capitalism that made it nearly impossible to, at the first stages of the so-called pandemic, to bring in the medical supplies and produce the medical supplies. It took us like 2 to 3 months before we started producing our own equipment. The rest of it was moved production to China. Really? The Chinese were making the medical equipment for us? just amazing. You know, it's like people kept on talking, hey guys, you know, you digging a big hole. Well, people who are coming into power and has been struggling to force the bigger corporation to start bringing back the production from China to mainland US or Europe, well, they were happy. They used this opportunity to say, hey, you see, you know, that needs to stop. So we can see a trade war with China. So what does the trade war with China leads to? Well, surprise, surprise, all our big companies are now talking about moving their production from China. Except they're not talking about moving the production from China to the countries where they have to pay a proper wage to people, where they have to build up businesses. No, they're moving to other countries where they can get some slave labor. If they can't get move their production to the slave labor in those countries, they still bring in tons of people from the poor countries, pay them essentially just enough to survive and make a couple of $100, which obviously in those countries means something but don't mean anything in any first world countries. For example, thousands of people were brought in from Ukraine, of all the places, to work on British farms. Now, let me remind you that Ukraine is not actually part of European Union. Ukrainian people do not actually have the right of free travel around Europe to work. They can come as tourists for 90 days, but they don't have the freedom of movement as people from European countries. And yet they're brought in their droves to work on British farms, because British farms pay so little to their labor that the only people they can pay to is, well, slaves they bring from other countries. Wow. Am I being weirded out by this, huh? Okay, we have obviously found out that the Amazon workers, apparently want to be kept safe, you know, as the key personnel, and Amazon doesn't want to do much about it. What else have we seen in politics and economics? Well, we have seen that if you keep people at home for too long and they have, well, lower income than they used to, or they have nothing to do, well, it all turns into a bit of a shitstorm, as it happened in US. And apparently people who say that Black Lives Matter in there tended to set black neighborhoods on fire. I wonder how many lives were lost there. Right, we can see a complete disaster when it comes to people who call themselves socialist and the left. Like, I don't understand how left comes with socialism, right? It really kind of confuses me, but not very socialist. Most of them, as somebody who was born in Soviet freaking Union, you know, I can say that no, those guys are as far from socialist as they could get. I mean, we get in talking about people who pay themselves higher wages than the President of the United States of America, completely failing at their jobs over dozens of years and still claiming to be on the side of the normal workers. We have also seen people from other so-called socialist sides completely failing at their jobs, to be honest. So yeah, I don't really like them very much. So going through all those things, like I say, we get companies moving their businesses from China to other poor places. So instead of dealing with this by telling the companies, hey guys, you know what, the only way you can import into our markets in these conditions is A, if you produce in our markets, and B, when you're paying the people around the world the fair wage. That sounds socialist, right? The socialist thing to do is to make those companies who produce their stuff abroad to pay a certain level of income, which would ensure that those people not only producing our stuff but can actually buy the stuff we make. You know, removing that unfair competition which completely destroyed tons of small businesses around Europe and UK and America, where the small businesses could not compete with the big manufacturers who work somewhere where they pay pennies for the labor plus a bit of automation, and all of a sudden a small business making, for example, local business making chairs, all of a sudden has gone to bankruptcy and completely disappeared. So tons of small businesses like, no, we don't care about keeping it fair, we only care about something which is like making very little impact on everybody else except making us feel good. Let's bring lots of people from the poor countries to us, and what are they gonna do here? There is no jobs. You remember that, right? Very little small businesses that can provide that basic jobs that those people from those countries actually need. Right? We don't want to help people in the camps, that refugee camps across the sea, but we're still having news articles about refugees dying trying to get into Europe, where, well, they're gonna struggle. But no, we're not gonna make the companies pay the fair wage around the world, because it's up to their government, not to us. Not to us, the main consumers, who have lost, who are losing their basic jobs, you know, for the people who are losing their fair wages, who are less and less capable of paying for the goods that those companies are producing and selling at a huge markup. But wait, let's do it the American way. Let's have a riot. Let's rob a few shops. What was it they say? Yeah, they defund the police, right? Why? Because the police have done something which they have been trained to do, badly trained to do, right? What was it that people say, 4 hours in every couple of years training they get? We expect them to actually do well by us, and we say, hey, let's give them less money. Let's make sure there's less police on the streets, and they have even less training. And we expect them to do what? Oh man, this is some crazy shit, and I'm not scripting this program, so I pardon my French. For the French, pardon my English. Right, so man, too much stuff has happened, right? And I spoke too fast. So some crazy stuff talking about police, and it's funny also, like, since I do look at the martial arts side of things, where people start talking about how choking people out is a good idea. Let's train police to choke people out, except for the professionals in choking out, the Gracie family, who says, well, actually choking people out should be resided to a deadly force only. So let me think which people I'm gonna go with. People who have spent their entire lives learning to choke people out, the Gracies, or the rest of the people who have trained a bit of Gracie wrestling and now talk that, hey, I tried choking somebody out in the gym and they tapped out, and that's why we expect police to be able to do that. crazy stuff from all over the world, right? So, talking a little bit about Black Lives Matter, obviously I mentioned them before. We have seen that kind of traffic happening mostly in English-speaking countries. We have to notice that, though. It's not much of that stuff happening. There's been a little thing in Berlin, but most of the time it seems to be happening around like English-speaking countries, and people go like, hey, let's just burn it all. Great idea, right? Let's just do this and that for what? And I do understand that people talking about like the bad things the police has done, but funny enough, you know, it's like I already mentioned this before, we have that, for example, US police will have a minimum of 1 million interactions a day. Right, imagine like the normal society, right? You know, imagine like a small teams that have like dozens of interactions a day with violent situations, and we expect them to do better. And then we say, hey, we want you to do better, but we're gonna give you zero training, and we're gonna hike up the overall distrust for you, and people will be encouraged to not talk to you or even attack you. I've seen a case of a police officer being attacked by a mob of kids. Like, literally, with all the honesty, if he shot at them, I probably wouldn't actually blame him, because they were outright violent. And yet he just kind of took it and walked away. You know, it's like, so we got this kind of attitude, complete brokerage. And then we're saying, hey, you know what, let's just get rid of the police overall. Well, we have seen the examples. Mentioning like people, like I say, lots of people talk about how you've got to be socialist, whatever. It's like, guys, I'm a socialist, alright? The stuff that happens in so-called socialist cities is a BS, okay? Right, you say they talk about neo-Marxism is coming. Guys, I don't want neo-Marxism, because it's as far from Marxism as it fucking gets. Okay, so this talks about like, look, this socialists and neo-Marxists are coming. It's like, look, most of those people, like, they only heard the name of Marx. They got no idea what they're talking about. And let's remember, if Marx was alive right now, he'd be saying, he'd be like, no, those people are not socialists. Those people are just freaking crazy. I mean, you remember, we're talking about a guy, no matter whether we like him or not, who said, hey, we have to have a scientific approach to things. We have to learn the questions, look at best solutions, and find the best solutions. And yeah, communism is inevitable, as current situation shows, but the way we reach it matters. It really does. I mean, look at these attempts of introducing a basic minimum income. I mean, I know there's a couple of cities in Europe who have already done it. But look also at US, right? They send everybody on quarantine, and now they're giving everybody, like I said, like up to $2,500, or I don't know, in UK I don't know if they give anything. I know in Germany they give little amount of money, but they still help you out. But they send you on quarantine, and if you lost your job or your enterprise have closed, they give you money to kind of stay afloat, like the basic minimum income. And now people are saying, hey, this basic minimum income is not really going to influence much of our economy, right? Completely opposite to what they used to say before. Unfortunately, we also see the abuse of this system. Like, we see that big corporations, for example, again, by big corporations, right? This is the problem we see. Is like a lot of abuse comes from big corporations. And I'm gonna probably stop on this point a bit longer. But again, many people who say basic minimum income is bad or socialism is bad because you're asking people to pay more taxes. And it's fair enough when they say this, obviously, but you ask them, okay, how much do you make? So you're complaining that you're going to be made to pay more taxes, right? And you ask them, well, how much are you getting paid? And they'll say, well, you know, up to 100,000. It's like, well, dude, like, you are not going to get more taxed. It's like there is a limit after which you can't tax anything. When people talking about getting the super rich to pay more tax, they're not talking about a guy who's making 100 grand by, I don't know, working and developing medicine, or by being an engineer, or by doing something like this. They're talking about, for example, a Wall Street trader which makes few millions, clean money, right, who is doing nothing except pushing money around, doing lots of short-term trades, and then gets this big paycheck bonus. Or they're talking about, like, let's say, football players who get millions in tax and then use lots of schemes to avoid the tax. So before we start talking about raising the tax, let's talk about fighting the avoidance of the tax. They're not talking about the average Joe who is making just more than 50 grand, you know. I mean, especially in US. In US, you guys are already paying more tax than Germans do. Alright, there's more higher tax in US, which is a non-socialist country apparently, than the Germans do, which is more socialist country, which is insane, right? Apparently, but that's the fact nevertheless. Right, so when people talk about this is like more fair play, that's the fair play. The socialism is about, depending on your approach, is about making sure that those big corporations pay fair wages all way round. Making sure that they are on the equal playing field with your mom and pop's shop, which is running like, I don't know, making something out of wood, or just being a usual, just kind of everyday selling like some groceries and something like this, you know. Making sure that they're on the equal playing field, but this is done through a number of means. And I know people talk about, hey, let's give everybody basic minimum income. Nice idea. You already see it being tried. Unfortunately, things like this don't quite work unless you make other areas sorted out. For example, when the landlord, which owns like 10 properties and makes $1 million a year, you have to question the sanity of the situation. Okay, not every landlord makes $1 million a year, but most of them do expect each property to bring in a couple of grand a year. Clean profit. We're not talking like, you know, maintenance and things like this. When this happens, you have to start questioning, is like, where is it our issues are? And we have to start questioning it. And this crisis have shown it, that we had lots of issues. For example, the housing market crashing in Chicago, in California, where people are starting to move out because things were so overpriced that staying there, especially in this situation, just doesn't make sense anymore. People are willing to lose their deposits and whatever just to get out of those contracts because they're being charged so much that, to be honest, unless you are making $500,000, you are not going to be able to pay that. And we need to sort those things out, right? Those things are starting to pop up. So the next thing we're going to see is the housing crash. People have talked about this for a while now, since this epidemic started. And people who are in the actual housing investment, they already admit that, hey, we see that the properties are starting to crash. They're not going to be able to sell them with lower income. Many people are not going to be able to pay their mortgages much longer, and they're going to start crashing. So we're going to see a property crash in the next few, well, if not weeks, then a couple of months. Probably by the end of the year, we're going to see another property crash. Good luck with that. So that's quite a bit of our GDPs wiped out. Again, things we noticing about the GDPs is like our GDPs were inflated by property prices, by overpriced service sectors which were not producing anything, just kind of saying, hey, you know, we take money from you and we play with it a bit, and this was considered as part of the GDP, which is never supposed to be. The financial and service sectors are not really producing much. Okay, so we can see, probably will see a higher push for more technology being introduced to productions. Obviously, like we have noticed, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of people who are now considered key personnel, which is still getting paid peanuts, but expected to work all the time. Probably the only people that will be expected to work. They're saying that we're going to have a second wave of the pandemic. Okay, we will. And again, people are going to be sent back to work to home. Some will be able to work from home, not all, but some. And what shall we see? We shall see that people who are the key positions, who are producing food, who are producing the basic products, will still be required to go to work. And yet these are the people who quite often are paid the least. Right, these are the people who have to have quite often 2-3 jobs just to make ends meet. Not everywhere, granted, but in many places they are the most vulnerable people. And it doesn't matter which color of their skin is, whether they're white, whether they're yellow, orange, black, hell, they could be purple for all I care. But what people who work these low level jobs are going to be still expected to keep us going, while they're getting paid for their job less money than people get as a basic minimum income. And will they be getting this basic minimum income? I don't know, and I don't think so. That's the problem of it. The point of basic minimum income is that it's the same for everyone, and yet the people that will be keeping us going will be the ones who are kept out of that basic minimum income. So the people who have the jobs that do not keep us running will be sitting at home getting more money than people that are working. That will be the insanity of the situation, and we'll see where it goes, okay? Man, I've talked for half an hour. Surprisingly covered a lot of stuff. Right? But I think for now I'm probably gonna finish. I'll start doing more programs, get my mind around it. Just something that came into my head. But if you like what I have to say, do click a like, do subscribe, do say hello. I try to do more programs, get back into making the videos again. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye.